following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. First, I want to let you know that the meeting is being recorded on the cameras in the room, and it will be viewed on Access Nashua Channel 96. So everybody be on your best behavior, or at least know that it will be memorialized. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. This is a wonderful turnout, and I appreciate every single one of you for being here. Now, why have I done this? I live at Clock Tower and woke up one morning and saw my rivers had changed. And I thought, what is going on? To make a long story short, the wonderful, interesting project at the dam has lowered the river to a point that it has never been this low before. And we're able to see things and see things happening on the Nashua River that we have a very short window of time to observe. It's the level of the river is expected to go back up in October. It's unclear if it's the first week, the second week, but think of the first week, which gives us 6 weeks to study what we can see, record, clean up, do whatever we think is important to do. And tonight is really a citizens forum, and I'm so pleased that many of you are here. I hope everyone has signed up, because I'm hoping that we can have some follow-up meetings, maybe to get smaller groups together for those of you who are interested. From my perspective, we have 3 different opportunities here. Number 1 is to clean up what has been exposed. And my understanding, I know for a long time I called it the river bank, but it's actually the bed. The brown, they call it muck on the side of the river, is actually the bed of the river. It's what's underneath, and water normally flows over that. Well, I hope I'd prefer to keep it open, Jeff. Jeff, I prefer to keep it open. So please keep it open, so unless the noise gets too much. It's so difficult when people arrive and they have a closed door. So to me, this is an amazing opportunity that I certainly did not expect to see or to have. And so I have organized this forum so people who also share my passion for the river can come out and talk about what you're concerned about. The 3 aspects as I see it, there's a lot of debris on what we now can see the exposed bed of the river. And so we have a chance to pick up these strange objects. There's a lot of large, look like tree limbs that are in the water, are now exposed. So we have a wonderful opportunity to, it's much easier to pick it up off the ground than to fish under the water to clear it up. The other thing, and I think we can use volunteers for this, and that is to photograph what we can see. And not only do we have granite walls and various types of walls up in the river, but we also have the vegetation. And the third issue for me is the vegetation. And that can wait till after the river goes back up, but I think it's important to photograph it, try to identify it, and possibly we could develop 3 different committees with all these 3 ideas in mind. We have a couple of dignitaries here, so I'm going to go around the room and ask everyone to give us your name and sort of what motivated you to be here tonight. I'm going to start with Jeff Daly. No long speeches, just...
Good evening, Jeff Daly. Concerned citizen in Nashua, also sit on the lower Merrimack River as a citizen and give my occasional tuppenny worth.
Denise Hurt, and I am a volunteer with various watershed groups in the area and also New Hampshire AMC paddlers. And we have been cleaning up the rivers locally all summer long. So I thought this might be another opportunity for us. Adams, I can't.
Oh, well, I wouldn't put it that way. Good evening. My name's Collis Adams. I'm the administrator of the Wetlands Bureau at the Department of Environmental Services. Barbara asked me to come down and join your forum this evening so I can give you a perspective from the state side. What's allowable under state law and under regulations, what isn't, what's a good idea, what's maybe not a good idea as far as the various activities that you're considering doing here in the river. So I'm here to listen, provide some advice from the state's perspective.
Jim Donches, I'm on the Board of Aldermen, and I just came to see what we could do to improve the river while we have the chance.
Sherry Dutsey, I'm an alternate on the Nashua Conservation Commission, and I'm just here to gather more information and get an understanding of what needs to be done.
I'm Dick Gillespie with the Nashua Conservation Commission also. I'm just here to see what's going to be done and hopefully get some cleanup here.
Cynthia Ranella. I enjoy boating, fishing, swimming, and so forth, and I'm looking for access, something that's better than what's at Greeley Park to the Merrimack River. They've done a terrific job on Pawtucket Boulevard in Lowell, where they have paved sidewalks, street lights, park benches, and so forth. I'd like to see a small portion of that done here in Nashua.
Hi, I'm Dave Lozo. I'm active in cleaning the river. As a matter of fact, we have a water chestnut pull on Saturday morning that I will be actively involved with, and I encourage anybody to come and pull water chestnuts.
Hi, I'm Donnelly Lozo. I serve as your mayor here in the city of Nashua. I came tonight to make sure everybody knows what we're already doing, because maybe it's an opportunity to figure out how you might be able to play a role.
I'm Greg Pohl. I'm with the Nashua Telegraph, and since I'm new in town and don't get out much, I just wanted to see what was going on here. I thought this would be a good chance to do that.
My name's E.Z. Paulson. I'm a lieutenant with the Nashua Police Department. I work second shift, and we're here to represent and see how we can assist cleanup efforts, make sure that all our members know there's a group of people going to be down on the riverbed doing cleanup, etc., just so that information is on power.
I'm Andy Campbell. I work for the New Hampshire Lakes Association, so I deal with a lot of invasive plants and animals, and I know the Nashua River is invaded with 4 different species, and I know there's a lot of cleanup that's been going on, so I'd like to do my part and help clean it up and protect it the best we can.
Kim Houghton, I am a reporter with the Union Leader.
Karen Archambault, I currently serve on the Lower Merrimack River Local Advisory Committee.
Kath Nelson, interested citizen. I chair the Lower Merrimack LAC. I work at the Nashua River Watershed Association, and I will, as part of that, I will be meeting with some interns tomorrow to also do a photo documentation of what's going on and probably augment what Jeff has already started in terms of documenting what we can see down there in preparation perhaps for larger endeavors. And I've also been asked by the mayor to be on the Waterways Committee, and I've gladly accepted and looking forward to that, and very enthused to see all these people out here tonight.
I'm interested to see what they're going to do at the back of my house, which you have an overwash.
David Glenick. I'm interested because I bought a pond which butts the river, and the city has destroyed the pond. And I'm wondering what they're going to do about the fish, because the pond was a breeding ground for the fish, and it's gone.
My name is Shoko Yoshikawa. I'm just a concerned citizen. I'm also a volunteer at the Mine Falls Park cleaning job. And I'm a material scientist. I'm in general interested in science.
Just for clarification, we're just going to stay focused on the Nashua River and the section. If you can can see here is where the dam is. And the portion that I can see is from this point on down over there. So I know for sure that this area needs to be cleaned up. So I think I'm going to ask our guest from Concord if he could tell us what different choices a community has when they want to clean up. Can they use volunteers? Do you have to hire professionals or a combination? And then I'll let the mayor tell us would you rather do it in reverse? I'll let you go first. One member is here.
Well, thank you. As far as state regulations go relative to cleaning up the river, there aren't really any. It's a great opportunity now that the water's drawn down to get in there and get out some of the debris. Certainly as far as shopping carts, I saw pictures with old bicycles, some old absorbent booms, other debris like that. Certainly that stuff can be removed. You don't need permits for any of that. You can get down in there and do that. As far as any sunken logs or branches or stumps that are down there that are exposed, we suggest that you don't disturb that. One of the things you have to be careful of is the bottom sediment has accumulated over many, many years, even centuries. And as you know, historically, there's been a lot of industrial use down here. So those sediments contain a lot of nasty stuff that you don't want to really disturb and reintroduce into the river. So the general guidance would be get in there, do what you can by hand. If there's debris that's protruding from the bottom, the muck, if you will, go ahead and cut it off, but what's below the muck, leave it there. For instance, if you've got an old tree that's toppled over, take the top off, leave the stump and the root system in place. Because again, one thing you don't want to do is disturb those sediments, because now you've created an environmental situation that's going to be very, very difficult to deal with, because once you remobilize those constituents, those hazardous waste constituents, they're going to move downstream, and that's not going to be good for us or our downstream neighbors. So that's one thing you want to be really careful of. But again, as far as if you've got wood debris that's down there and you want to remove it, by all means, go ahead and remove it. If you're going to do anything to recontour the bottom, again, I wouldn't recommend that because of the sediments and the nature of the sediments in there. As far as some of the shrubbery along the banks, we have a law, statute in New Hampshire called the Surface Water Quality Protection Act. It was formerly known as the Comprehensive Shoreline Protection Act. However, Nashua went through the process of exempting the Nashua River from the provisions of that statute. So you don't need to comply with any of that. So you've pretty much got free reign as to what you want to do down along the banks of the river. Of course, you got to be careful. I understand there's some roost trees, some roosting trees for eagles, perhaps somewhere along the river. I had heard in the park somewhere. But certainly when you're looking at the banks of the river, you want to keep the vegetation there, because it's those root systems that's so very, very important in keeping those banks stable. Once you get in there and start disturbing that, now you start eroding those banks, and the banks start moving, and the river can start to shift, and that's not something that's going to serve you well at all. So that's something you want to be careful of. Other than that, like I say, when it's down, if you want to get in there and remove things, by all means, go ahead. You don't need a permit from the state. It's all allowable. Again, caution you on disturbing sediment. So that's kind of a general overview, and I'll let other folks speak, and if there's specific questions, I'd be happy. Sure.
I feel there's a distinction on the vegetation. Along where there's a wall, it seems to not serve the same purpose. And what I've observed where I live or other where the granite walls are, it looks as though weeds have become trees over time, and they've taken over. They cover up the beauty of our architecture. If we want to do some of the things that the ideas came forth here to make our river banks a place of joy and beauty, I think the vegetation along the walls would be different from the other side. Is that true?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. You know, especially when you've got rock walls, you want the vegetation in there anyways, because as the roots get in there, they work their way in amongst the rocks, and they can tend to loosen them up. So if you want to remove vegetation to expose the historical granite block walls, by all means, that's something you can do.
analyze those trees or come out and identify them and talk about them before we do that?
Well, if you're talking sizable trees, you may want to do that. But if you're talking shrubs and small diameter trees and whatnot that are sort of growing out of the cracks of the blocks, the granite blocks in the wall, probably not an issue. But I don't want to give you any guidance from a structural engineering standpoint. But certainly, if you want to remove that vegetation to re-expose those walls and the historic walls along the river, something that you can do, absolutely.
I trust you'll be available along the way to advise us. Absolutely. How about questions from the citizens? Oh, okay. Is it better now? Okay. Well, he hasn't come by and yelled at us, so I guess we're all set. Okay, questions?
My question was about removing trees that may have fallen into the river, because isn't that habitat for fish and turtles and all other, I mean, aesthetically it might not be pretty, but it's ecologically.
Yeah, you'll always get a debate relative to that. A lot of folks believe you need to clear that out to keep the rivers free-flowing so you don't contribute to flooding or diverting flows to other areas along the bank and causing erosion. There's the other side of the other folks in the other group that say it is good fish habitat. You ought to leave it. In fact, there are some people who say it's a good idea to what they do called chop and drop, where you cut trees and let them fall into the river intentionally to provide the fish habitat. It's really going to have to be up to you folks, but if there's trees that are along the shore, well, first of all, if you've got hazard trees that are leaning, we certainly recommend you cut those off. Leave the stump and the root system in place on the bank, drop the tree, and get the tree out of the water. I would anyways. I wouldn't leave those types of trees into the water, but there are two schools of thought on that. So I'll leave that up to you folks as a community as to which is more beneficial for you folks in this stretch of the river.
Another question. Whose responsibility is it to do that? Is it the owner of the land? Is it the city? Is it the state? You'll put the mayor on the spot and tell her it's the city. But whose job is it to review that and to make that decision?
Well, first of all, I've been in this job way too long to know better than put a mayor on the spot, so I'm not going to do that. The question is, whoever wants to propose it can propose it, but you'll have to get permission from the landowners. And as long as the landowners don't have a problem, then you can certainly go ahead and do it. So I don't know, who owns land up and down the river, but if you're going to be working on the banks of the river, you have to coordinate with the property owner to make sure they're okay with that. And if they're okay with that, then no, you're covered.
Yeah, sort of a committee to do that if we want to talk about beautifying our river side. So many people, and I'm one of them, feel that we underutilize our beautiful rivers.
Yeah, the important thing here is to engage people early what you're doing, because, outreach is the most important thing. Get people on board, make sure everybody understands what's going on. People don't like to be left in the dark. They don't want to wake up one morning and hear chainsaws running and trees dropping into rivers. They don't want to wake up and see somebody on their property, their river frontage, without their permission. So it takes a lot of work up front, a lot of coordination with the property owners to make sure you've got the permissions to get access. Make sure you've got a plan in place. Some of it, if you're working with bigger trees, you may need equipment. That equipment needs to work from the top of the bank. You can't be down in the riverbed. And so you may need an excavator that can reach out and help you with those big trees as you drop them, to pluck them and bring them up on shore and cut them up and deal with them up there. But certainly I've been involved with these sorts of issues, and outreach early and often is really, really important. Because again, nobody likes to be surprised. If everybody knows what's coming and they know what to expect, then you'll get a lot of buy-in, you'll get a lot of support from the community.
Any other questions from the?
You mentioned about the sediments. Has DES identified the various areas up and down our section of the Nashua River that are contaminated, just so people are aware?
No, to the best of my knowledge, DES has not done any characterization of the bottom sediments, but I could be wrong. That would probably fall under the Waste Management Division, because those are typically hazardous waste. That's outside of my purview. but I do know enough about it. I don't believe they've done any characterization because I was briefed by the commission before coming down here. He said, one of the things, stay away from the sediments, don't stir up the sediments because, you know, things could get nasty real quick. So that's the best I can do with you on that.
Well, thanks for coming, because I've already learned a lot more than I knew before. But I did have this question about the invasive species, and I don't know if you're the right person to ask. David mentioned the water chestnuts, which we know about, but I think Andy was his name, mentioned 4 invasive species. Do you know what those invasive species, the other 3 are, other than the water chestnuts, and how big a problem are they?
I don't know what they are, but I'll bet they're Japanese knotweed, purple loosestrife, perhaps bittersweet. Andy, do you know? Am I hitting the ones? Do you know? But those are the usual culprits, the usual suspects. Yeah. And as you know, when you're dealing with invasives, you have to be careful the way you handle those. You have to be careful how you cut them, how you handle them, how you dispose of them, because you can spread very, very quickly. It doesn't take much to take a small stand of Japanese knotweed and invade the entire riverbank just by mishandling of it. So there are ways that you need to do it. And there's some guidance on the DES website, ways that you can dry it, bury it. You know, there's different ways to deal with it so that you don't end up spreading it to other areas along the river, because it'll spread very, very quickly.
So this takes it back to the, is there any more detail on what you consider a hazard tree? Because you mentioned there were a couple of things being floated if it was impacting, say, a granite wall and moving. But is there, I understood it more if it was a hazard to the structure. Structure, it would be, but what do you consider a good guidance in terms of what would be a hazard tree?
We like to use what they call dead, dying, or noxious. If something is dead or it's dying, or it's a noxious tree, in other words, it's split, it creates a hazard, it's a good idea to go in there, be proactive, get it out of there before it causes problems, because it'll just keep leaning farther and farther, and when it does go over, it's going to pull the stump and the root mass away from the bank. It's going to take the soils with it. It's going to expose soils, which will now erode from the velocities and the erosive forces of the river. So it's a good idea to go in there proactively and get them out of there so that you don't have to deal with a worse situation in a year or two. Does that answer your question?
Usually, does it take somebody with some tree understanding or expertise to make that call, or can a typical homeowner make that call?
I think common sense is really what's needed. I think most people, you know, especially people along the river, have watched trees and they know the rate that they're tipping and falling. So I don't think it takes a whole lot of expertise. I don't think you need to spend a lot of money. I don't think you need to call an arborist, for instance, to do that sort of thing. Although if you've got one that's questionable, it may not hurt to get somebody with some professional experience in. They may be able to give you some guidance to save, because certainly we don't want to cut down all the trees. They provide shade for the fisheries, and they keep the water temperature down, which helps with the dissolved oxygen, all those sorts of things. So, you know, you do want to make sure that, you know, you're just not cutting trees for the sake of cutting trees, because they certainly serve a purpose.
I find it really interesting that the Nashua River is exempt from the federal regulation, because that's the excuse that a lot of people have given. They say, oh, we can't cut any trees down. And you ask the homeowner, and they say, oh, the city does that. And the city says, no, the homeowner. So it's been just a huge misunderstanding. So clearing that up is really important, and I thank you for that. And also the fact that the homeowner is in charge of the vegetation along the river. We'll have to have classes in that.
But we do have a local wetlands buffer, which Dick Gillespie, now, you know, as part of the Conservation Commission, could probably elaborate on. But there are, the rule that Collis is talking about is the state rule, and then we have our local wetlands buffer that also speaks to vegetation removal within the buffer, and that is still in place.
We do need to clarify that. We do not come under the federal regs or the state regs, but we do have some local regulations. Is that correct? Are you willing to speak to that? Well, wait till I get you a microphone to speak into.
The Nashua River in Nashua is a prime wetland, and it carries with it a 75-foot buffer that the city has put an overlay on any state regulation. We would have some authority or some discrepant, we would have a control over that 75-foot buffer as a Conservation Commission. You could be limited to certain things you can do in there. You'd have to apply for a permit to disturb that buffer. So there are some regulations involved. The exemption that we're speaking of here is for the state regulation, the Surface Water Quality Protection Act. The city has applied to the state, and they're not subject to that regulation any longer. That only covers a certain part of the river in the downtown area. It doesn't cover the whole river in Nashua, just the downtown part of it. And that's about all I can tell you at this point. I'm not sure exactly where it is. It ends up just below the Mine Falls Park. It doesn't go into the park, as far as I know. And it may go down to Jackson Falls Dam. I really don't know the proposed extent of that.
So that changes things a little bit from what we've been saying. So if a homeowner along the city part of the Nashua River wants to make some changes, they should apply to the local Conservation Commission? Okay. And what is that process? Do they come in with a full application, or they just come in and chat with you, or?
If you're going to have a full wetland application,
okay.
To the wetland buffer.
Okay.
It doesn't entirely rule out working in the buffer. We do allow certain types of changes or modifications in the buffer, and there's usually some kind of a mitigation involved. If they want to do work, we do require some guidance and some perhaps mitigation for that.
So if we wanted to, as a community, organize a group to spruce up the riverbanks, we probably should go to your commission and start talking with you guys, see what you have to offer. Would that be advisable?
I would believe, yes, that's correct. You have to get an application from the planning office.
I just want to elaborate on the portion of the river that's got the urban exemption. If you go to the DES website, I think, let me see if I got the steps right. Go to the DES website, click on programs, go to the shoreland program, and click on, I believe the link says consolidated list of waters. It'll pull up things and you'll see rivers across the top. And if you click on Nashua, it'll bring up an aerial photograph and it'll have the portion of the Nashua River that has been exempted from the Act under the urban exemption. So it's a really handy tool. It's available on the website.
Does the state also have a list of consultants that specialize in this? If somebody does want to hire, say, someone to design the vegetation along the edges or to clean up, or do you have a list of people that do that?
Well, we can't go there as a state agency. As you can probably imagine, we can't make recommendations for private consultants. However, what I would recommend is if you go to the State Joint Board of Licensure, they have a list of certified wetland scientists, and you pull it up and it'll have all the wetland scientists. I'm the first one on the list. You can't use me. So, but there's a whole list, so you can call them or contact them, the ones that are in your area, and they'll be happy to come out and talk to you and give you recommendations and a proposal on providing assistance.
This is a citizen forum, so this is your chance as citizens to. Oh, well, okay. Mayor Lozo has graciously come here tonight. She has been working on a plan, and we actually, if I'm correct, we're getting a preview. It's going to be presented to aldermanic committee, I think this month you mentioned, and then it would go before the full board. So she has agreed that she'll let all of you folks have a preview of what her plan is. And I believe it's strictly cleanup, but I'm going to let you clarify it. If you want to point out, use the map to show it.
Let's grab my glasses in case I need to look closer at the map. So I guess I don't really have a preview of a plan, but I think what's important is there's a lot of different aspects to our rivers, and we have such an opportunity here in Nashua, between the Nashua River, the Merrimack River and the work we're doing there, the canals, which need some work, ponds, which I'd like to look at us reclaiming some of them. There's just this whole host of opportunities. We actually have 6 invasive species in the Nashua River, sadly. 4 would be better than 6. No, okay. I'll do my best, Alderman Pressly. Okay. So as I was saying, there's just a lot of opportunities here, and so that's one of the reasons that we're creating a waterways committee, of which we have a few members here tonight, and I'm glad that they're here. But happening at the same time is, of course, the project here for the crest gates for the dam, and one of the advantages to that is that we'll be able to take some of these properties out of the flood zone. And another opportunity that that presents, of course, is what else can we do along the river in this general area? So working with the project there that Mr. Stabile is doing for Cotton Mill, we were able to have him include in part of his RFP the cleanup of the area around the copper dam that they've created and some of the trees that are actually growing out of the retaining wall behind the library where you see a granite retaining wall. We had trees grow out the side. So working with FERC as well, because FERC actually has some requirements around hydro dams. So there's been some regulations that have been included in the RFP for that. So a lot of this cleanup is going to be taking place. And as you mentioned, Alderman Pressly, you've seen them stacking trees in this general area. And so that's part of what's going on there. And then as part of it, knowing that the river was going to be lowered and knowing that there would be an opportunity there, we have been getting prices from the same company that's doing some of the work here on what would it take for them to help clean further along. As a matter of fact, we're going beyond the bounds that you've described here, because one of the places that we know we have a significant amount of debris in the river is behind, along where the highway is and Home Depot and Shorty's, primarily because of plowing during the winter. When we've had really bad storms, a lot of things gets caught up and it melts in and over the bank because it's not defined well. So we have plans for cleanup all the way up to Coliseum Ave. So we've received some prices. We think it'll be about $15,000 to get it done. We knew that this was, of course, the riverbed and not the riverbank, and we didn't want people walking in that riverbed. So volunteers that are thinking they're going to get right in there and grab a tire out or a shopping cart will do exactly, as you were saying, disturbing that bed, which, of course, with Nashua Corp here for many years, and we know there are PCBs here at Nashua Corp, we don't want people walking in here. Plus, for those of us that have actually stepped into the river near the edge, getting in and out of a kayak, you know that you sink a lot of the time. And so the risk department is like, no. You can't have people walking along the bank getting stuck trying to pull out tires and shopping carts. But there are opportunities for volunteers beyond this project too. So if any of you are interested, I know Alderman Pressly sent around a sign-up sheet tonight. We are interested in volunteers on the things that you can do. As far as some of the photography, this whole part of the project is being videotaped and photographed as, again, part of that project. From the dam down to here, and there's probably a little bit on this side as well. But I've been working with Kath Nelson and the Nashua River Watershed group, as well as the Lower Merrimack group, because we have a couple of folks that wear different hats here. And the interns that Kath mentioned are going to be starting work and cataloging a lot of what's here as well. So there's some opportunity there. So what's coming into the Alderman is the request for those funds from escrow money this year. It'll go to the Budget Committee and then the full Board of Aldermen. But there will be enough time. We're working with people to try to make sure we can get that done.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very nice of you. If I've looked at my calendar, and if we have to follow a certain aldermanic and legal process to spend that money, and it might be as late as September, I think, 24th to have a final decision on spending that money. So maybe we need to think about what we can do as citizens in the meantime, because that's quite a ways away. So one thing, ideas from the crowd here, if you'd like to jump in. I think there are enough people that are interested in doing something now. And I hate to disagree, but I know that there are people that do walk on that. And they have been doing that. So maybe it's a good thing the police are here. Well, according to what I've read, legally it is a walkway. When the river is low, legally it is a public walkway. So people are allowed to do that. It's probably not smart or safe. Okay, Kath?
I've had the pleasure of organizing quite a few river cleanups, both here in Nashua when I chaired the Conservation Commission, and I just did one in Fitchburg this spring. There's two different scenarios. One is you're walking along a nice trail along a river up in the top of the bank, and you're picking up cans and trash and things like that. And in that case, we still, give people very good training as far as what not to pick up. There's sharps out there. There's, many things, even in those conditions. The kind of conditions that you're talking about once you get down here in Nashua, down along the bank and on the bed, are nothing like that. It's nowhere that a person should go unless they, that's their business, a DPW worker or somebody that specializes and has very good equipment on. I mean, there's rusty things out there, again, medical sharps that, you can't control for, a myriad of things. So while I love the can-do attitude of some of our citizens, there is a place and a time to do cleanups, and I guarantee you, as part of this Waterways Committee that I will be part of, citizen-based cleanups will be part of that. But again, it will be something along the likes of, from in back of the library, along that, that walkway, staying on the top of the bank and doing the official trash. This is, again, these are, starting here, these are bags, and, we give people, you can have people have gloves, and, basically just a simple coordination with the city to agree to pick up trash containers that are left out by citizens. That's the kind of nature that I think we want to move forward on, and I know the mayor is very committed to doing that. But again, just a word of caution that it's a whole different situation once you're talking about the banks and especially the bed, which you've heard from callers. I encourage tonight's a great forum. I mean, these are, citizens. I'm meeting our interns tomorrow morning at 10 on Margaritas to start the photo documentation. I don't have immediate plans but I know the Mine Falls Advisory Committee is always doing cleanups, so yeah, I would promote maybe tonight's a good time for that whole thing to get started. I mean, I guess I thought that's why we were here tonight, to start to talk about that.
You're absolutely right, and thank you. I think I feel a certain level of sensitivity to time, because it seems to me the pickup is a lot easier with the river being so low until the 1st of October. Is that true? When do you plan to do what you're talking about?
what looks easy, like an embedded bicycle, I stood there with my husband saying, okay, how would I get that bicycle? It looks kind of easily. First, you'd have to scramble down the edge. You would have to have somebody, you'd probably have to tie a rope, have somebody up top pulling it out. It's rusty. You definitely have to have, you know, proper equipment on. Would I want to recruit just general citizens to do that? When I've held cleanups before, they're open to citizens. You get people out there, families with kids, you know, they have dogs, they have things. It's something you want to think through. What seems to be easy is not always quite as easy. And also, as Collis says, could start resuspending sediments into the river that we may not want to do. It's not that we don't want to go forward with it, but I guess I'm feeling like that's something you need to really think about and decide whether it's somebody you want to hire as a contract to, you know, to do. I'm seeing opportunities for citizens, but it's probably not maybe the same things that you're looking at in terms of what's embedded in the river itself.
Dutsey, a member of the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, I have to agree with what's being said tonight. I mean, I think there might be a feeling of pressure because the water's been low and now we see debris that we haven't seen before. When the water goes up again, one, we won't see it again, and even if we did clean it out, I'm sure in a year or two it would probably look the same. So I'm thinking that maybe, you know, from a citizen's perspective, we let that go because I agree completely. That's something, you know, that really we should leave to the professionals. But what maybe our input could be is working on the invasive species and doing some of the pulls that I think volunteers can be trained for. And we know that that's really is a continuing problem. And the other thing that I think has brought us together is really to continue this one flow of information and also have this as the start of long-term planning, because a lot of the things that you're talking about, Barbara, and we're talking about, beautifying the embankment and having it a place where maybe we can have a walkway, those are things that need to be carefully planned, understood, have professionals involved. It's not something that as citizens we can just go ahead and do. So, you know, I think that this is a good beginning for us to share this and see where citizens can play a role, and maybe a role in physical work, maybe in ideas, and understand where the professionals take over. So that would be my suggestion.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Pressly. I know you want to keep tonight's meeting to this section here, so, you know, anybody, when the meeting is done relative to this section, any of you that are interested in hearing about what the plans are for the Waterways Committee and what we'll be tackling and how you might play a role, I'll stick around for a little while after to explain it.
Thank you very much. Well, I have a selfish interest in this too because I live at Clock Tower. And I want a commitment from somebody that they will photograph that stone wall. And it's not only at Clock Tower, but all the buildings are wonderful mill-yard buildings. Many of them have 100-year-old granite walls. And we need to document, maybe even map their condition, because that you cannot see under the water. And so, and I believe maybe the photos can be taken from the opposite side of the river, but some of them may require getting into boats. I had some photography people that were planning to come tonight that I do not see here. So I might follow through on that because I believe those walls are really wonderfully important. And I know that in some places they are losing, the granite chunks are falling into the river. And to me, that's why we have to take this time to do something more. Yes, Dave.
I can videotape
videotape all of the shore, both sides. It won't take long. I could take still pictures as well, or I have my son do it. My son is a photographer, so he can do that. But I think videotape would be better because you can replay it often and see detail. You know, you can enlarge it and etc.
That's great. Did you want to comment on that? Oh, no. I'm just scratching it off. I think there may be quite a few photographers that would like to do that. Maybe one follow-up from this meeting would be to see if we can, you know, it's great to take the pictures, but we have to have them on file different places. Maybe the Historic District Commission should take a look at them.
Because the Lily Art Show is small, starting Saturday, Sunday.
How true that is. So one thing, and that doesn't cost money, that will not cost city money, that will just take some people time. But to me, it's still a wonderful opportunity. I think also to photograph the vegetation, because you can see how close it is. You can see if it's tilting or leaning. So I think photography and documentation at this 6-week time frame is really pretty important. So aren't we blessed? A short meeting on a summer night. Any other questions that anyone has?
Can the water be lowered at will in the future, or is this a one-time thing?
I've asked that of many people, and I have yet to get an answer. They're capable of doing it, but I don't know if they will do it frivolously. I would imagine there has to be a specific reason to do it. Am I correct?
It actually has a lot to do with the hydro dams and their licenses and what we do there. So there can be another opportunity.
Okay, and would some of you like to stay? Maybe a group of, a cleanup group in one corner, a photography group in another, and I have your numbers and your emails. I hope that we can contact you and start getting together more often. Would anyone else like to have a... Oh, okay. How dangerous of you. And you have time to get to the mall. Would anyone else like to have a comment? Thank you so much, all of you, for coming. This was very informative for me, and I hope it is for you too. So thank you very much for being here.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.